Succulents are a great addition to any garden, and we have been collecting a few varieties of succulents over the months. But with some of these succulents, if we are not careful, we end up losing the plant, and this has happened to us in the last few months. Hi, and welcome to Fresh from My Garden. In today's video, I'm sharing some of our experiences with succulent plants regarding watering, sunlight, and potting mix. We have purchased a lot of succulents and we love adding new varieties to our collection. But due to improper care, we have also lost many of those plants, and over a period of time, we realized a few important things that we need to keep in mind when growing succulents. The first most important thing when growing succulents is not all succulents are meant for indoor spaces. So, if we are going to keep a lot of these succulents indoors, some of them may not survive. Some, in fact, do very well even if they don't receive too much of light. So, the varieties that do well indoors are the Sansevieria or the snake plant varieties, Hayworthia, aloe vera, and Kalonchi varieties that we have indoors, and they are doing pretty well. But we've had the jade plant and the echeveria varieties which just died very quickly after being kept indoors continuously. So, when placing these plants indoors, the most important thing to keep in mind is that they must receive a lot of bright indirect light or some morning sunlight. So, place it by the windowsill where it can receive some morning sunlight, and just 3 to 4 hours of morning sunlight a day would be sufficient for these succulents to do well indoors. But if they are placed in a spot where it doesn't receive too much of light, over a period of time, we'll notice that these plants start shedding their leaves and losing its beauty. So, that is what happened with our jade and echeveria plants that we almost lost due to keeping them indoors. Another important thing with succulents is watering. So, the watering should be done only when the topsoil is dry. The soil should never remain wet for a longer period of time. And also, when the succulent plants are being watered, make sure to water only the soil in which it is planted and never the leaves. Because if the leaves remain wet for a long period of time, that can cause fungal infections on the leaves, and that is another way to lose these succulent plants. Overwatering also causes these plants to shed their leaves. Here is the jade plant that we had indoors. So we had couple of varieties of jade that we had indoors, and they started shedding their leaves after being placed in a spot where it doesn't receive too much of bright indirect light. So I have brought them outdoors and have placed them outdoors, hoping to revive these plants. As you can see here, this jade plant has shed almost all its leaves except for a couple of leaves, and this plant has been indoors for quite some time. But on a positive note, these plants can be propagated from these leaves. So I have placed these leaves on the soil, and I'm hoping that they will revive and also give me few new plants. Pest infection is another problem on succulents that you can treat with some neem oil spray. And this is one of my succulent that has been infected with some mealy bugs. But in spite of that, you can also see new growth by the side of the plant. So once this is treated with some neem oil spray, it should do fine. This was one of the plant that was kept indoors, and I am placing this outdoors for a few days in a covered area where it is protected from harsh sunlight and the rains. So hopefully in some time this plant will revive and I can bring it indoors again. This was a display that I had on my dining table a few months ago. So here you can see some polka dot plants, and along with that I have this tray of succulent arrangement. But unfortunately neither of these plants did well and I lost almost all of them. And now I have redone this succulent tray with some succulents that I have propagated recently, and I have placed this outdoors in a spot that receives a lot of bright indirect light. So the Haworthias in this planter were propagated from the previous one. These are jelly bean succulents that are indoors on our windowsill and has been doing well for quite some time. We recently transplanted these into a different container which is just a few inches deep but really long. So we separated these plants and transplanted them into this container which is still on the windowsill. So on the windowsill it receives quite a bit of bright direct light. Here I have some of the succulents that I saved before the plant completely died. So I have some Crassula, Echeveria, Haworthia varieties which I have in a covered area outdoors. So it does receive a lot of bright indirect light and doesn't receive any direct sunlight so that the plants don't get burnt. Here I have some small containers that is filled with some coco peat and a little bit of vermicompost, and I have placed some of the leaves that have shed off these succulent plants, and some of them here are starting to show signs of new growth. So even though I have lost quite a few succulents due to improper care, I am able to revive them or propagate them so that I can get new plants for my garden. Succulents do well in shallow containers with good drainage. Here is another echeveria and a couple of burrow's tail that I have propagated from leaves, and they are on the windowsill indoors. So, keeping these few tips in mind, we can all grow different varieties of succulents in our garden. So, these are the two succulent baskets that I planted a few months ago. And if you haven't watched the video, you can definitely go back to my channel and watch the video in which we made these two succulent baskets. And even after a few months, they continue to do well since it receives a lot of bright light outdoors, and it's at the north facing side of our garden. With proper light, soil, and watering, these plants live in our garden for a very long time. Hope you enjoyed today's video and found the tips that I have shared in today's video useful. Please do share your thoughts in the comment section below. Let us know what kind of problems you have faced with succulents. Also subscribe to my channel for more videos on gardening and garden tips. Thanks for watching Fresh from my garden.